Greetings, friends, and welcome to the woods. This is a pretty rough time period for a lot of us. There's been a hefty eclipse just a few weeks back, and that affects our emotions because it came out in the energy of relationships. And some of us use our relationship with friends and family to anchor our lives. Because of the way our society is structured, it's very difficult to have a strong investment in our career because there's no loyalty when it comes to who you work with, who you work for, even if you work for yourself. Because things are changing so rapidly, it's very difficult to know from day to day, from year to year, if what you have vested yourself in is going to continue. There's no constancy in that. Religion, too, is facing an upheaval as people learn more about the history that has shaped what they believe, what they have been given to believe. And politics is a mess, as I'm sure most people can attest. Most people who've looked into it can attest. So, what do you have? You have your friends and you have your family, and that holds your anchor. So, when we have energies that sweep through that shake the relationships up and make it difficult for us to connect with those we love and to understand and to exalt the connection that we have with others. It's profoundly disturbing. Again, most of us, that's our anchor in this life. That's the one thing that we know is going to be there for us. The one thing we know that we can trust, that we can count on, and that we can build our lives around. So, difficult energies, difficult for all of us. But here we are, and I want to address a question someone had for me about have I read, do I know of a particular person? And I have not. I'm going to look into the person that they recommended. But I want to explain to you why I'm not a reader right now. I learned to read when I was about 3 years old. I, I taught myself, and I had a family who was very generous with giving me the tools and the time to learn phonics, to develop my reading skills. I learned to read better than I could speak. My social skills were not very well developed, but my reading skills were. So I spent the first half of my life reading intently. When I read, I can interface with the mind, the perception, the perspective of the author, and if the literature is well grounded, I can pull into the perspective of the antagonist, the protagonist, the different characters. I can enter into their way of looking at things if the author has correctly and with great ability been able to tap into what they're writing about. There are a lot of authors who are going to be very angry if this ever gets repeated to them, but to my understanding, a lot of creative works are filtered down, and the core of what's created exists somewhere. It comes filtered down to us. And the more precisely that we can recreate it in with our talent, with our innate ability, the stronger it's going to stand the test of time. It's going to become a classic. the better it's going to be. However, many of us will shift what filters down to us based on what we think people will like, or with what relates best to us, or we'll put it into our words, our perspective, our understanding, which may not be exactly what those that we're writing about, sharing about, may not be exactly how they would see it. So there is some creativity that goes into it, but usually the closer that you align with the source of what you are writing about, or the music you're hearing, or the dance that you are seeing in your head, whatever the creativity is, the dish that you're imagining, as close as you can be to exactly what you get through your source, what you tap into, the better it's going to be. And the more people who share your perspective are going to like it. Now, when this comes to, I'm speaking on fiction. Now, when it comes to nonfiction, the sharing of ideas, that is exactly what the author is, their opinion, what they're presenting. I have to be very, very careful, because when I read that, I'm walking around in their head. And there are some perspectives that I have to kind of twist myself into a pretzel to share, to experience. The alternative is to hold myself apart from it while I peruse it. And then I'm not going to get all of the nuance and the understanding. Now, that was fine in the first half of my life, where I was constantly reading and I was really living more other people's perspective through what I was learning and what I heard, and I held myself completely open to what I was hearing. When I was brought into the discipline that I practice, once I finished my apprenticeship, I went from learning to practicing. So my experience comes from, my opinion comes from my experience. I took all the things that I had learned and I wanted to see how practical it was in this country, in this time period, in this life, being who I am. If it wasn't something that I could verify or use, if it didn't translate to the here and now, then that was something that, it's wonderful history, I'd put aside. I'd look at, okay, well, why did it work for them then? It doesn't work for us now. Interesting. Well, let's put this aside. Or, now that I understand why it worked for them then, but it doesn't work for us now, can I translate it? Can I change it so that it will work now? If you want to do that with a discipline, you have to learn the discipline as is. You have to learn the principles. You have to learn the practices. You have to learn it from the base up as it is presented to you before you start looking at modifications. If you start modifying the discipline that's being shared with you before you've mastered it, you're missing out on a lot of potential, what you could get from the discipline, and you could be endangering yourself. From what I've seen, at least with the spiritual practices, a lot of the rules are built around keeping you safe. And when you start modifying things, you may not realize that you've headed into deep water until you're already there and it's too late. So I learned it just as it was shown to me, and I worked it just as it was shown to me, and I fall back on it just as it was shown to me, because my teacher, he believed in experience. He believed that you have to practice something. You have to try it. Did it work? If not, get rid of it. If it worked, improve on it. And record everything so that you can go back and see what you've done and see the patterns of how things work. So, I when I reached a point in my life where I was reading spiritual things, and very often I was hearing the same arguments if it disagreed with me, and the same confirmations if it was something that I did. And I could trace back the authors from who influenced them further down the line. And I could go back to the original source and see where everything started. I could go back to the original source and see the things that had been shifted and modified and left out. Sometimes important, necessary things. That's when I discontinued deep study and reading of other people's work. It's very difficult for me to shift between learning and practicing. And at this moment, especially with what has changed in our world and what is continuing to change, I find a great deal of value in practicing, in remembering what has come before in lifetimes before when the atmosphere was similar to now, remembering and practicing. Thank you for sharing time with me. Hopefully that makes things clear. I would certainly love to hear uh, others' perspectives, and I will certainly look into what has been recommended to me and share my thoughts. But for now, welcome to the woods.